This episode of the Neurodivergent Experience is brought to you by RTN Mental Health Solutions. With up to a 5-year waiting list for autism and ADHD assessments via the NHS, and that's even if you get a referral from your GP, getting an assessment in the UK has never been harder. So if you're like me and can't wait anymore, going private may be the best option for you. RTN offers online assessments for kids aged 6 right up to adults, with prices starting at £900. To make it more accessible, RTN can offer payment plans up to 5 months. You can access their remote services from the comfort of your home anywhere in the UK, and RTN offers group and one-to-one counselling, a private route to access ADHD medication following the assessment, and will even fight for you if your GP doesn't accept the results. So if you live in the UK and can't wait to get an assessment, go to www.rtnmentalhealthsolutions.com and use the discount code RTN23, making it even more affordable for all of our listeners to get an autism and ADHD assessment.
Hello, welcome to the Neurodivergent Experience. I'm Jordan James, also known as the Autistic Photographer, and I'm joined by my co-host and very best friend, Simon Scott.
Welcome to the Neurodivergent Experience. This week we are talking to Matt Jolly, who is the Operations Director at RTN Diagnostics. Hello, it's Mr. Jordan James. How are you, my friend? You okay?
Yeah, I'm just rocking to our intro. I mean, I know we've changed it and that might upset a few autistic people out there, but I tell you what, please try and get used to it because it's so much cooler than the last one because I chose it. I never
considered that. I never considered that people would be like, change.
Change. Oh, change. Oh, change.
Dear. Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
Change.
So,
no, man,
yes.
I'm riding high. I don't know what's going on. But I'm riding high. The country is burning, but I'm riding high. It's horrific out there, and I've just put my head in the sand and gone, do you know what? I am ostriching this all the way through because I can't take it, because I know that if I start looking into it, I will hyperfocus so much on it. It's the only thing I can think of. And why would I do that to myself? Because I can't do anything about it other than do this podcast and say, if you are taking part in these quote unquote alleged protests, you are an absolute pillock. Let me say pillock one more time. You're a pillock. And if you throw things at police, you're a pillock. And I hate you. So don't even listen to my podcast. You pillock. Anyway, apart from that.
What a great welcoming start to this week.
I'm loving it. I'm loving life. I'm so happy.
Oh,
I'm so happy.
Goody gumdrops. I don't want to leave the house. But anyway, moving on. Shall we start this episode, Jordan? Yeah, why not? Well, we've got our good friend Matt Jolly there, just wondering what on earth have I signed up for. Hello, Matt. How are you, my friend? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, great to be here. Looking forward to having a chat today.
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. And the topic that we're going to be talking about today, as we've alluded to at the beginning of this episode, is getting diagnosed. Is going private worth it? And obviously this is a big conversation I'm sure a lot of people that are neurodivergent are either having or have had with themselves. I know I have, because I went private myself. And obviously, if you've been listening to this podcast for the last couple of months, you will know that we have partnered with RTN Diagnostics. And they offer a variety of incredible services, which Jordan would know all about because his family went through them.
Yep, my wife was diagnosed through you guys, Matt, and so was my son. And my daughter was diagnosed a few years ago with a different company. But I have to say, all my family have been diagnosed through the private system. I'm the only person in my family that has actually went through the NHS, and I seem to hit the lottery every time I go. I don't know if it's because I'm just so good looking. I think it's pretty privilege. I'll be honest. If you're as handsome as I am, you just get given things all the day long. But yeah, essentially, I went through it really, really quickly, and I can't believe that it is taking so long for other people to get diagnosed. It's horrific out there. It really is.
Yeah, it seems to be. And this is why we're talking to Matt today. One, to get a better understanding of the diagnostic criteria, asking the very serious question, with the right to choose coming in for a lot of people, is that an option for you? And also just getting diagnosed in general, going private, is it worth it? So Matt, how did you come to your work with RTN? I'm right in saying that you were diagnosed through them, weren't you?
Yes, I was, although that was more recently for myself. But
Right.
The obvious place to start here is the journey that my family has been on in the last couple of years. So looking back on it now, what I think was the catalyst was when we came out of lockdown and the kids then had to go back to school after having this really confusing, 18 months, 2 years of staying at home, homeschooling, all that stuff that we remember from that time. And so it started off, we felt like there was something wrong with our family because we used to shout and argue, and there'd be violence, there'd be throwing stuff, mainly the kids towards us as adults, but it was really, really unpleasant. If I go back 2.5 years, I didn't know the first thing about neurodiversity. All I knew is that we were not happy as a family, and we needed to do something about it. But then what happened is our middle child developed really severe anxiety and trauma, and it was all related to school. And a typical day when he was going to school, he'd get up in the morning, he'd have a meltdown first thing over sensory issues, trying to wear his school uniform. So before he even left the house, he would be in a really dysregulated state, and then he'd get to school and he would mask all day long, and then he'd come home and just explode because it was awful for him.
Coke bottle effect.
Yeah, exactly. And so that over time, that sort of escalated. So what probably one of the turning points is his mask dropped when he was at the school gate one day, and he had a meltdown, and there was some of the teachers there. And then from that point onwards, he couldn't mask anymore. And that's when his anxiety went through the roof. In the end, he couldn't attend school, and we said to the school, look, he can't come in, he's not mentally well enough. And the school were really, really unsupportive, unhelpful, constantly getting badgered about non-attendance. And, we're told we need to provide a letter from a medical professional saying he's unfit to go to school, but the GP wouldn't write one. The GP referred us to CAMS, they referred us to paediatrics for autism and ADHD assessments. The GP told us, and this was probably around May, June time, the GP said, it's not that busy in this area. You should get your assessment done before he goes back to school in September. I think it was just about by the end of the summer holidays, we'd heard back from paediatrics to tell us that you're on the waiting list and it's 11 months. So that was incorrect information we were given by the GP. CAMS originally discharged us because we'd taken him to see a private therapist. I complained and they readmitted us and basically just put us on some waiting lists for some parent workshops. I attended one and it was not very helpful. I attended another one, which was like a 6-week one, and the first session was not really very helpful, so I didn't go to the others. And so we'd gone through the normal channels, GP, CAMS, paediatrics, the school, and effectively we felt like no one was listening to us. No one was offering us any help or support. And we just felt totally isolated. And, my other 2 children are neurodiverse as well, and they were having different issues at the time. But as a family, the level of stress and anxiety that this was creating was just immense. The only way I can describe it as a mental health crisis that we were going through as a family, to the point, both myself and my wife had suicidal thoughts at points. My wife actually messaged me one day telling me that, and I called the local mental health team, got a voicemail, left a message, and no one ever called me back.
Exactly the same thing happened to me when I was in the worst place of my life as an adult in 2018. That's when I called the Time to Talk after 3 full voice boxes. It just went dead, and if it wasn't for photography, I don't know where I would be now. So I know exactly what you mean. The system, the NHS current system, is just letting us down constantly. And it's not just autistic people. It's not just neurodivergent people. It's letting my friend who has cancer, it's letting him down. The amount of mistakes they've made and prolonged treatments and not looked into things. It's just not good enough. And obviously it's not the workers. We know that. Well, it is some of them that don't understand what neurodivergence is. That would be nice.
Yeah, and I mean, well, I feel like I could do a whole episode just talking about the NHS, but we, I mean, we felt totally lost. You know, you spend your life thinking more subconsciously than anything. You know, if I'm ill, I can go to the doctors and get help. You know, if I'm struggling with things, I can go to my council or my school or all these things that you pay for in your taxes every month. And we tried all of them, and none of them would help us, bar putting us on waiting lists, you know, that we'd have to wait a year plus on. So we obviously had to look elsewhere. And there was two organisations that were crucial for us, that turned things around for us. You know, one was a local charity called the Maze Group, who is government funded, but they run a 12-week parenting course, which was absolutely incredible. Sue Barker is the lady that runs it, and she's an incredible lady. But in that 12 weeks, we were taught what is neurodiversity, how does it affect people, you know, how do you navigate the school system, what are your legal rights, what are your rights to benefits. And we got to meet, and it was all, you know, it was a group of peers, all people whose kids got neurodiversity and having difficulties. So we got to meet lots of peers and people in similar or worse situations than us, and that was probably the most helpful bit. But it gave us the knowledge and understanding that everybody should have, and that's NHS staff, teachers, parents, children. You know, if everybody could do that course, the world would be a much better place. And then the other one was RTN, which is, you know, who I work for now. So we were originally referred to RTN by a friend who had their daughter assessed by them. And I looked at various options at the time, you know, and so some of them were quoting, you know, $2,000, $3,000 for an assessment. And RTN was, I think it was £1,500 for dual assessments of ADHD and autism at the time. And they had no waiting list. You know, they had payment plan options. I think we did the first one on a payment plan. And then I think my mum and dad helped us pay for the other two kids a little bit later on. So it's not like we had thousands of pounds sitting in the bank, but we were in such a difficult place that we were willing to do whatever it took to pay to access private referrals.
That, Matt, is the point, isn't it? Is the fact that even when you don't have the money, you look at it and go, okay, well, there was that holiday I wanted to go on, or there was that telly I wanted to buy, or I needed to buy something new for my car or something like that. And at the end of the day, I had to make sacrifices as well, because it was more important for me to get my kids looked after, to get my kids the help that they needed, and then obviously my wife to be recognized and understand herself. It was more important to use the money for those things than to use the money for things that I don't need, even though, you know, you want them, you always need them. You know, it does often look like a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because I have that in my experience of when I went through my private assessment. I think all in all it cost about $1,950, and I actually had to ask for a majority of that money off of my parents, because at the time it was the choice of paying next month's rent or getting an assessment. So unfortunately I did have to ask for help with that, and I did have a payment plan, but it wasn't to the people, it was to my parents. So, and luckily I've managed to have cleared that. But obviously that option isn't necessarily viable for somebody who's, you know, in their 20s, whose parents can't necessarily help them. So yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one out there.
But it was worth it, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, absolutely worth it. Yeah.
I mean, look how it's changed our lives.
Totally. Our life has completely changed. Through going through that process. At the time, I was joint owner of a marketing agency, and my wife was employed by that company. Through everything we learned through RTN and the Maze Group, we were then empowered to make some big decisions. So I left the company that I owned. My wife left work altogether. We took the kids out of school, and they're now homeschooled. And we did that because our attitude was, what do we prioritise? Our children's mental health and well-being, or their education performance? And it was a no-brainer.
No-brainer for me.
It's a no-brainer, especially as a parent. That's all you want for your kids is to get equal opportunities. And the worst thing about it is the fact that us NDs, we don't get equal opportunity because it's not, even when we, by the way, diagnosis isn't like a magic wand and suddenly everything just happens for you. You still have to fight every day for those things. EHCPs, being taken seriously by CAMs, being taken seriously by teachers. And like we literally did our episode last week, which was about having to change schools. And Simon read out an email from one of our listeners about their son who has a diagnosis, who is neurodivergent, and yet is not, and by the SEN teachers, isn't being looked after. It's great because there's not training. But the fact is that if you don't have a diagnosis, it becomes 100 times harder. So, and there are schools that are great. There really are. And for me, if it's about your kids, diagnosis if you can, you definitely should prioritize it. That's from my experience, and that's from your experience, and the experience of every single person I've talked to who's gone through the system. And the fact is, Matt, if the NHS actually did their job properly, if they trained their staff well, if they managed the business of the NHS, which it is a business, let's be honest, if they managed their business well and they hired the right people and the government did a good job, then private wouldn't have to happen. So at the end of the day, you're providing a service. You're part of the people who are providing a service. You've been part of that service because you have to.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. There's still a lot of work to be done post-diagnosis, but it does make things a hell of a lot easier. And there's other things out there, you can claim disability living allowance if your children are autistic or have ADHD. You can claim carers allowance if one of you has to leave work to look after the children. So there's lots and lots of help and support out there, which and you PIP. Don't. Yes, exactly, PIP. You don't have to have a diagnosis, but my God, does it make it easier to access those things. And so going through that experience with RTN, like I said, a couple of years ago, I didn't know the first thing about neurodiversity, and I learnt so much in that sort of first 6 months. And it was then that my wife and I realised, we're neurodivergent as well. So we've since gone back to RTN and been assessed privately. And so my wife's been diagnosed with ADHD and I've been diagnosed with autism. The kids are all autistic and ADHD, which is no surprise really when you look at parents. But it was such a positive experience for us. And I say that actually, the one thing that sticks out to me, and this is what I would say is the primary reason why I now work for RTN, is that first assessment they did for our child who was going through some really difficult mental health problems at the same time. We were in a really bad place, myself and my wife, Zoe. And so the diagnostic interview was booked for Friday, and I got an email from the clinician, I think it was a day or 2 days before, saying, I'm really sorry, going to have to reschedule, I've had an emergency come up, etc. And I'm generally quite an understanding person, so that's absolutely fine, we'll reschedule it, no problem. So it was rescheduled for the following Friday. And when that Friday came, she did exactly the same thing, but this time about 2 hours before the interview was booked. And that second time in a row with such short notice, that was, they'd crossed the line there for me, and I was very upset about it. So I contacted RTN and I complained. And it was how they dealt with the complaint that's the thing that sticks out most in my mind. So our CEO, Michael, called me on my mobile personally, and we spoke for probably about 45 minutes. He's a lovely guy. He knows, he's got a PhD in psychology. He's not a businessman by trade. He's a psychologist by trade who happens to have started a business. And he had so much time for me, and he sorted everything out. We ended up having so he called me on the Friday that the appointment was rescheduled, and we had the appointment the next day on the Saturday. So he sorted everything out straight away. He gave me his personal mobile, told me if I ever needed anything or wanted to talk, just to pick up the phone to him, and he would be happy to speak to me and help. And it was that I've had a quite a varied career, but I've always been very successful in the jobs that I do. But one trend that I've seen throughout my career is if I like a company, I will only work for a company that I like. And if I like a company, I will give it my all, and I'll be so passionate and hardworking and diligent and all of these things. The second I realise that their vision or, whatever sold me on the business is a load of crap, I lose interest completely. And it's so rare. You look at companies talk about their vision and their mission and their values, and most businesses have got those things. But it's so rare for the business owners to actually believe and, work to those values. And it was that shone through for me with RTN, that actually they cared, they listened. My own diagnosis is a lot more recent. It's literally a few weeks ago that I got my official autism diagnosis.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And
Never.
yeah, but
Not you always were, but
yeah, exactly. And I work for a diagnostic company, and I've been through the process with all three of my kids, and so I knew I was autistic before I got the diagnosis. But it was still so helpful, the report and the meeting with the psychologist, because I understand things so much more now. So I am alexithymic. I have RSD, and those two things alone explain so much of the stuff that I've always found difficult. Recognizing and talking about my emotions. I know I feel bad, but I don't know why, and I can't tell you why. That's been a big thing in my life. Yeah, and the RSD, whether it's stubbing my toe or someone saying a passing comment that's perceived as the slightest criticism, the anger just goes through the roof. It's like that for me has just those two bits on their own. Like, I was expecting the autism diagnosis, and it's good to have it confirmed. And part of the reason for doing it is I wanted to show my kids as well that although you're autistic, you've got ADHD, that places no limitations on you, because I've had a successful career, I've got a beautiful family, I've got a lovely house, it doesn't need to hold you back, and you can be proud of it. And that's what I wanted to show them, that actually, I'm proud and happy to tell anyone that I'm autistic.
Yeah,
but
that's what
on
we're
a
here for,
personal
man.
level, exactly. And on a personal level, just understanding those nuances of alexithymia and RSD in my case. So obviously there's other areas like PDA and, all these other things. But that, for me, just so many things just clicked into place that now it's like you say, I don't have to be so hard on myself. And my wife and I can have a good laugh about it. I actually got the psychologist that did my report. So I have this obsessive behavior around stacking. I'm like obsessed about efficiency. So when I stack the dishwasher, I have to do it in a certain way to maximise how much stuff I get in the dishwasher. If my wife stacks the dishwasher, I literally unstack it all and redo it, and it drives her mad. I know it's really sad, isn't it?
I'm doing
brave.
a weird face.
It's
By the
brave
way.
is what it is, Matt.
I'm doing a weird face because I literally whenever I think I'm like, as long as the door shuts, I don't really care. And most of the time, every time my wife pulls stuff out, half of it's not washed, and she's like, "Why couldn't you put it in properly?" And I'm like, "Sweetheart, you're lucky I put it in at all." And that's not a male thing. That is a ADHD thing. I am just so unorganized when it comes to having to do chores that I do not want to do.
That's so interesting though, because we're all so similar in different ways.
I know. But it's such a running joke now. I got the psychologist to literally write in my diagnostic report about about my dishwashing stacking expertise, just so I can take it to my wife with it on paper.
Little insider comment, get it in the old assessment. Yeah, nicely done, Matt. Nicely done.
I want a piece of paper saying that Jordan is now exempt from all chores due to being literally demand avoidant and autistic and ADHD.
This right here is the context of what a diagnosis can do for you. We can joke about it. We can laugh about it. We can talk about our insecurities and what we feel uncomfortable about ourselves in a fun, jokey, positive way. I think if I was to sum up in one word what the diagnosis brought me is peace. Mm. It brought me peace in how I think about myself, how I think about other people, how I approach other people, how much pressure I put on myself to whether it's achievement or just going to the shops. And another thing as well is it's brought peace to my parents because they don't blame themselves anymore. And I don't blame myself for being a bad kid and giving them a hard time with their mental health because we did the best with what we've got. And that's what a diagnosis I found in my family did. Well, I mean, when we had our private assessment, we went through a company called Axia based up in Cheshire who were great. There were things they could work on, but they were good. And like what we were talking about with RTN, there's things that they could do that they don't do. But what happened in that room, I walked in there and my family got a 3 for 1. Even though my parents didn't get diagnosed, they went, well, autism, ADHD child, ADHD, meet autism. And it was my mum and my dad. And their relationship has changed massively because my mum doesn't go, Tim, why do you have to do the dishwasher that way? And my dad goes, well, why don't you do it that way? That argument doesn't exist anymore. They just have a joke about it and they just move. You just move on. There's no pressure. There's no like weight to things anymore. It's like, why do you do that way? Rather than spending all your energy delving into why do I feel so crap when my mum takes gel out of my hair? It's RSD. But trying to explain that to somebody without the help of a diagnosis, without the help of reference material or context, it's like you don't have tools to defend yourself. It's like being a gladiator and not being given a sword. The diagnosis is a sword and a shield. That's the beauty of it, I find.
That's also the benefit of going private. And we talk about, is it worth it? It is, because when I got diagnosed through the NHS, it was, oh, by the way, you are autistic. Well done. And I was like, cool. And what now? This is how much they understand autism. The people that assessed me for autism, right? They went, oh, we've got group therapy sessions each week. And I went, did you say more than one person in a room that I don't know? And you're inviting to me this and calling it therapy. I'm going to need therapy after doing that. You absolute. Let me say that word again. Pillock. It's just so ridiculous. It's like I literally, as I'm talking to her, describing, my behaviors, and I'm like, I don't really like being around crowds. I don't really like talking to strangers. And if I am in a room full of people, I just tend to take over everything or just sit in the corner and not say anything. So either way, I'm not really participating. I'm either taking over everything and being overbearing, or I'm literally just a mouse in the corner you never even heard of. And she knows all of this. And she's like, yeah, I think that makes you, I mean, that's not the only thing, by the way. She's like, that makes you autistic. Just that one thing. But then she's like, yeah, by the way, would you like to be part of this group? And I'm like, well, Did you not listen to?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, oh my god, are you wearing soundproof headphones? Is that what's happening? So, and then there was nothing, and then I had an appointment booked to talk to her one more time, which I missed because I'm also ADHD. Rebooked it, and then it just never happened. Like, I wanted to rebook it, and she never called me back, and that was the help that I got.
That's it. You're lost now.
Ago.
Lost.
Well, they give you 6 on the NHS. You get 6 weeks to have that follow-up appointment. If you miss the 6 weeks, you're out.
Which is difficult anyway, because demand avoidance, anxiety,
you just get discharged,
distraction,
and I'm sure a lot of autistic people will relate to. If my phone rings and it says private number, I ain't picking it up.
I throw it out the window.
No. No.
Private.
If it's important, leave me a voicemail. I will read it, hear it, delete it.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, at least with when you go private, and I know this is, I don't know about other companies, but I know it's with RTN. You guys offer like a care afterwards, aftercare. You actually help afterwards. It's not like, oh, see you later, bye. It's, plus we offer help. Can you tell us more about that help?
Yeah, well, let me just tell you about what we do as a whole, really, because, we work for the NHS, so we have contracts delivering assessments on behalf of the NHS in certain areas.
Yeah, we love the NHS.
Yeah. But do you know what? And you said it earlier, it's not the people. The individuals running those services are fantastic, really knowledgeable, but they're overloaded with work, they're underfunded, and so they're under huge amounts of pressure. And, when they do an assessment, they do the ADHD assessment or the autism assessment, and they follow the same NICE guidelines, they use the same tools that we use. So they'll use an ADIR and an ADOS for autism, and then they'll use an ACE or a DIVA assessment for ADHD. And we use exactly the same tools. We have got an almost identical approach for the core assessment, but what we do is additional stuff around the edges that isn't a requirement of the guidelines, but we are in a position where we're able to do that. So during the sort of pre-assessment phase, we'll screen for anxiety, depression, alexithymia, PDA, trauma. RSD is picked up more during the assessment, but we also get a medical history from the patient's GP, and we will look at any other contributing factors. So that could be anything from history of mental health, acquired brain injury, childhood trauma, all of these things that can influence an assessment. And in some cases, we actually have to turn people down if it's not appropriate to do an assessment at that point. For example, if they're currently undergoing inpatient psychiatric care, that is not the right time to be doing an autism assessment. So, we're sensible and safe in terms of how we deal with people's referrals. And then we do all of the sort of screening questionnaires and the assessment questionnaires. Then we do the diagnostic interview. So for ADHD, that normally lasts around an hour and a half. For autism, it normally lasts around 3 hours. But if they take longer, they take longer. Our clinicians won't say, right, your 3 hours is up, we'll leave it there. If there's still things if there's still things to cover, they'll carry on. And to the point where if they've got another appointment booked soon after, they will arrange a follow-up call, within the next couple of days to finish it off. And that happened with mine. And I'm sure it happens all the time because, if you start talking to an autistic or an ADHD person and they get talking and passionate or,
monologuing.
Yeah, exactly. They're easily up that 3 hours for an autism assessment. And that's what happened to me when I did mine. And so the psychologist booked another session for Saturday after I had it done. And we spent an extra hour together finishing it off because we hadn't discussed everything that we needed and wanted to discuss. So then once that happens, so the diagnostic report is written up with all the results of all the questionnaires. the clinicians write up in terms of their observations and what was discussed and all of these things. And then it goes for a initial review. So one of our clinical admin team will review the report, go through everything, make sure that all the information is accurate, that it's all there, check all the spelling and grammar, and that it makes sense, and they'll read it more from a patient's perspective. And once they're happy, then it goes to the clinician to do the diagnosis, basically. And then it will be, so we have multidisciplinary team meetings every week. So we don't review every single report. It's just not practical. But we review a sample of reports, typically the more complex cases, every week to make sure that we're happy with the clinical decisions being made. And sometimes people don't get the outcome that they're expecting or hoping for. So, for example, and this is a good example, actually, we had a patient who went through the process, and when it reached the point of diagnosis, the clinician said, we can't give a diagnosis because of the amount of childhood trauma is potentially giving what we call diagnostic overshadow. So it was impossible to untangle that and determine, is this because of trauma or is this because of neurodiversity? And because we couldn't be confident in our diagnosis, we didn't give a diagnosis. But obviously that person was not particularly happy with that result. So what we then did is, that was the point when we then introduced a more thorough trauma screening at the front end to try and identify that early on. So we're always looking to evolve and improve the way that we do our service. And then once someone gets a diagnosis, they can have a post-diagnostic review session where they can ask any questions. We can talk about the contents of the report. But as well as screening all these other conditions, we will look to take a neuro-affirming approach as well. So the report doesn't just say Jordan has challenges with X, Y, Z, and Simon, has difficulty with this and that. It would also say, look, these are their strengths. Matt's brilliant at stacking the dishwasher, and it will list all those, strength-based points as well. And then we will give recommendations. So the recommendations are largely signposting, which, I'm not a huge fan of signposting because it's then putting it onto someone to do the next step, which particularly if you've got a demand avoidant person, then they're unlikely to do that. But what we do is we try and tailor that as much as possible. And it could be a mixture of things. It might be some helpful YouTube videos. It could be online resources. It could be onward referrals to other services. We might recommend that they go for a dyslexia assessment, or they go, to see someone for their anxiety, or, so it can be onward referrals.
Or listen to an amazing podcast with two very handsome I don't know which one that is.
Do you know a good one? We can start recommending it.
No,
when we've made it, we'll send it.
Yeah, that's why we're making it, because there isn't one, so we had to make it ourselves. Can I just say what it brings me to a really good point when you were talking about the trauma aspect and the fact that may lead to some sort of diagnosis crossover, because obviously nowadays you do have developed ADHD, which wasn't a thing that I was aware of a while ago because I thought it was called something different. But now I've been told that you can develop ADHD due to phones and the way the world is and stuff like that. So do you ever look for that, or is it just if people are born ADHD?
So the way that we assess, and it comes down to, and I know there's a lot of mixed opinions on the diagnostic criteria. So there's two sets of diagnostic criteria, the DSM-5 and the ICD-11, which essentially clinical professionals have developed these criteria that must be met in order for a diagnosis to be given. And they are very much deficit-based, like you said earlier. and not strengths-based. The strengths-based element that we bring in, we do that because we want to. We think that's important. And, whilst neurodiversity brings challenges, it also brings strengths. And we think that's important for people to know that. Now, is the DSM-5 or the ICD-11 diagnostic criteria the best way to determine the diagnostic outcome?
No.
And I agree.
Well, you just asked me a question.
And I agree. But
I assumed.
Is that the process that we have to follow to be compliant? Yes, it is. So that's what we do.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you didn't come up with it. You don't have the power to change it. You just have the power to change it for an individual person, but you can't make that official. So you are doing your best as an assessment center to bring the positives to the surface rather than, forgetting about them because, it's just this illness, or how the Americans look at it as a literal disease. They literally refer to it as a disease and is assessed by the disease center. And it's just so upsetting to me.
This is where a lot of people really struggle through the NHS, is the NHS will send informant questionnaires to the school and to the parents. And the parents will fill it in and the school will fill it in. The parents will talk about all these difficulties and challenges and, what life is like at home. And the school will go, Lucy's a fantastic child. She has absolutely no problems at school. She behaves perfectly. She gets good marks. We've got no concerns whatsoever. And at that point, the NHS will go, nope, not got ADHD, because it doesn't match.
Yeah.
So we had, and when that happens to us, we had one recently, and normally we can see through the fog because of the amount of detail that we go into. And just to clarify as well with that trauma thing, if we didn't diagnose people with trauma, we'd be out of business because, like I say, most neurodiverse people have trauma. But
I've got a record saying we all have it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I very much agree with Dr. Luke Bearden's theory around microaggressions and that cumulative effect.
Yeah.
And that's what I've experienced throughout my life. But so it's rare that we can't diagnose because of trauma, but if there is really significant trauma, that can prevent us from diagnosing, which is why we now screen for it at the front end, because obviously if someone's go through that process and then be told, actually, we can't give you a diagnosis because of this, that's not a very pleasant thing to have to go through.
Yeah,
so,
it's a good idea.
So, so this recent example, so we had a patient that was referred to us by the NHS. We did the assessment. The school and the parental informant form were polar opposites. So what we did is one of our clinicians went out and observed the child in school, and it was still not conclusive. So what we did is we then went out and observed them at home, and it still wasn't conclusive. We also did a QB test, which we don't do as standard, but if we feel like we need more evidence, we might suggest it for ADHD. And actually, at the end of that process, in that particular case, that person did not meet the diagnostic threshold. However, we didn't just dismiss it at the first point where school and home questionnaires don't match. So sorry, it doesn't meet the criteria. We took every possible step to determine the right outcome. It still didn't meet the diagnostic criteria, which is where those criteria can fall down sometimes, because we're all unique individuals. Some autistic people out there that it has huge impact on their life and they're not able to live independently and look after themselves on their own. And then you've got autistic people out there who are billionaires, innovators. Like us.
I'm not a billionaire.
Speak for yourself.
To be fair,
not yet.
A lot of the billionaires probably can't live by themselves either.
No, that's true. We've got pay people to do it for them. But, so it's not a perfect situation. It's what we have to work with. But, perhaps we need to start a campaign to get the diagnostic criteria looked at, because I know there's plenty of clinical professionals that have got the same viewpoint. So
yeah, I mean, I've looked at the research, and I think from what I've seen, most psychologists and psychiatrists think the DSM isn't worth wiping your butt with. Honestly, it is so ridiculous. It is so. I mean, this is the diagnostic criteria manual that literally said that being gay was a disorder, and they only got rid of that in the 70s. So I actually do think that there is a possibility in the future where it will be a point where we won't be a disorder, because look, I'm disordered in my life, but I'm not a disordered person. I'm very ordered in a lot of ways. Simon, because you haven't talked much.
No, it's because I'm finding it fascinating. I'm finding it incredibly interesting.
But I want to know, because obviously, Matt and I are talking about our experience as parents, our experience as autistic parents. Is it something that your parents, obviously you said, your parents were thinking that they were, do you think that they would benefit themselves from the piece of paper, as it were?
Well, it's interesting because my parents now say that they are autistic or autistic ADHD, and they don't need the diagnosis because I have one. And they kind of have gone, well, they're smart, logical people. They've gone, well, he hasn't picked it up on the playground. He's got it from one of us. And they've done their own research and looked at me and understood, alexithymia and RSD and OCD and PDA. And they've gone, oh, crikey, my life makes sense as well. So I'm sure a lot of parents will have that when they're having their kids diagnosed. And again, come back to that phrase that I use now daily. If you think you are autistic, just imagine you are and see how you feel. And if life does improve for you, life up close is, as Charlie Chaplin once said, life up close is a tragedy, and in wide lens, it's a comedy. And that is the beauty of the diagnosis for me. It gives you that room to take a step back and look at yourself objectively and go, I can laugh at this now. It's not life-threatening. It's not a disease. It's not a condition. It's not the end of the world. It's just a part of who I am. I am exactly who I am meant to be, and let's just get on with it. And that's what this has been the big process for me. And for so many of the people in my life have kind of gone, oh, I get on really well with Simon. I feel most myself when I'm with Simon. Simon doesn't judge me. I don't judge myself when I'm with Simon. Maybe I should look into that. And a lot of people around me have, and I know people that have gone through the Right to Choose recently. A couple of people actually that listen to this podcast and reach out to me and said, wow, what you're doing is changing my life. I listen in every single week, and it's like having my own experiences reflected back to me. The diagnosis gives you the ability to have a conversation without feeling like you're on the back foot or there's something wrong with you. And that is one of the big things that it's given for me, is I no longer feel like the boy who cried wolf with everything I struggle with. I feel like people have to take me seriously now. And I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to this are dying for that. Yeah. And hopefully this conversation, this episode may bring people to RTN. It may bring people that are listening to this that are professionals to meet up the standards of RTN. I really hope that, just us talking can do that.
But I also hope that for those that, that going private isn't an option financially or whatever the reason, I hope it gives you the courage to go to your GP and ask. And by the way, Right to Choose is also an option that is a right. Matt, can you tell us about Right to Choose? Because I think our listeners would love to hear that, because some people just can't afford to go private.
No, absolutely. And it's something that it's shocking how few people are aware of it. And it's not just individuals, but also NHS staff, GPs, just aren't familiar with what Right to Choose is.
That's not shocking, Matt.
But that's something that we need to change. That's something we need to change, because this is going to be the answer for a lot of people. if you're referred under the right to choose through your GP, you will be sent to the private provider that you choose. You have the right to pick which one, and they will complete the assessment. So you should receive the same service that you would get through that provider if you were paying. But with right to choose, you don't pay. The NHS pays for it. So the assessments that we do, if someone comes to us for right to choose, they get exactly the same experience. We screen for all those other areas or conditions. Sorry to use that word, but and you get exactly the same experience as if you were paying us for the assessment. The difference is that the NHS pay us at the end of the day. So if you want more information about this, I would definitely check out ADHD UK's website. They've got some really helpful resources on there. They've also got details of other providers. On the RTN Mental Health Solutions website, which is our sort of overarching brand. So we've got our diagnostics business, RTN Diagnostics, and we've also got RTN Medical, which can support with medication for ADHD, but also other common comorbid conditions, so anxiety, depression, etc. But if you go to the RTN Mental Health Solutions website, there's a right to choose page, which has got an explanation of what right to choose is, how to access it. There's also some useful resources like a letter that you can take to your GP about right to choose in case they don't know about it, which a lot of them don't. So it's a really, really, I think it's going to be a game changer for a lot of people. And what I'm actually seeing is a lot of the NHS commissioners now, rather than awarding big contracts to single providers to deliver these assessments, what they're actually doing is they're doing an accreditation process where they're basically assessing and approving providers for right to choose, so that they can then write to all their GPs and say, right, here's our list of the 5 approved providers who accept right to choose referrals. Anyone who comes to you that you want to refer for autism or ADHD assessment, give them this list and then they can pick who they want to go to. So they're not even putting them on the waiting list. They're being sent straight down that right to choose pathway. And I think we'll see more and more of that. So RTM, we're in talks with a number of different commissioners about being able to qualify. It's not that we don't meet the standards or the guidelines for the process. It's that technicality that we have to have a specific type of contract in place with the commissioner before we can accept right to choose referrals. We're currently in talks with a number of commissioners about doing that, and hopefully in the very near future we'll be able to accept referrals for all those different types of assessment. But yeah, I think right to choose is a really, really important thing that is going to be a game changer for a lot of people. So have a read up online. I've given you a couple of options there of where to start looking, but do your own research online. Get to know your rights. If you're so inclined, you can read the NHS guidance on the patient choice framework, and it explains everything in great detail. It's very boring, but some people like to get into the detail of these things. So that's also available online. But yeah, I think that's going to be a large part of the solution to this backlog. The other issue on the horizon, which I know Jordan and Simon are experiencing as well, is that once we do clear this backlog of people waiting for assessments, there's then the follow-on problem if people then want to access, particularly for ADHD, if they want to access medication, that we're already seeing increasing wait times because you have to be seen by a specialist before you can start that medication. You can't just go to your GP with your bit of paper and say, give me some ADHD meds. You have to be assessed by a specialist, typically a psychiatrist, before they will prescribe that medication for you. And the waiting list to access that, well, you can tell us about it, Jordan.
Yeah, my wife Sylvia, she is currently on that list and has been since last October. She literally called her GP 2 days ago, and they said, they sent it out. There's nothing more they can do once they've sent it out, and there's just a huge backlog. And it's like I said, it's a postcode lottery in a lot of these situations, and it's But the crazy thing is even if she did have the titration and she did start the medication, then she'd be having to go through the whole thing of trying to get hold of it. So at the moment, and I'm seeing this a lot more lately, is that, you know, she's just, I think I notice it more because I am on the medication. I'm noticing how many mistakes that she makes, and how frustrated she gets with those mistakes. Whereas before, we were both making mistakes and both getting frustrated. So I was just like, oh, that's just being human. But now I know that we're so similar, but I don't get so frustrated because of the medication. I think things through better. Now I'm just like, oh, I want her to have it so bad because I know how much it will improve her life. And it's actually upsetting me as much as it's upsetting her to see her struggling when she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to struggle because there is actually medication out there that helps us. And that's what, it's so hurtful. And that's not just my wife. That is hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, it's even worse when you've had the medication, Jordan, and then
it's taken away.
Then you're taken away, because I know what I'm like when I'm on it, and I'm on it. You know, I turn into freaking Sonic. I'm flying around doing everything at 1,000 miles an hour, but doing it at 100%. And now I feel like I have to even think about the words I'm saying in case the wrong word pops into my head, or just my mouth just doesn't do what my brain wants it to do. It's so frustrating being inside, knowing I can do everything to such a high level, and then it's just not coming out properly. It's so frustrating.
I don't know about you, dude, but even on my meds, I am fresh out of spoons.
Yes, my spoons have yeeted out the window. I think it's time to wrap up. But Matt, thank you so much for today. What we're going to do now is we're going to do Jordan's quote of the week, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody. So there you go. You might enjoy this, Matt.
We are all human, and we cannot help where we are born. So please remember, we are all people. Yeah,
that was a good one. Very nice. I much preferred that one to the what's it, smelling feet dog thing. That was good, but I appreciate Good. Liked it. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. I have learned an awful lot about the whole process, even though I've been through it. So it shows you that there is a lot of work to be done out there for so many other people that are looking to just get a diagnosis, whether it is private,
yep, thank you,
or through the NHS. So thank you for the work that you do at RTN. Thank you for speaking with us today. And it's been an absolute pleasure. So everyone that's been listening in, please go check out RTN Diagnostics, and also with their medical group as well, RTN Mental Health Solutions on the Google or wherever you get your mental health help. And please use our code, guys. We do have it in all of our episodes. It will be in the description below. It will give you just a helping hand with getting over that hump. And as Matt mentioned as well, they do have payment plans. So even though it's not for everybody, and it is a big, difficult, huge decision financially for a lot of families, there are options out there. So please go and do all of the research that you can on it.
We're not saying that we think they're the best because we promote them. We promote them because we think they're the best. Because I would never, ever promote anyone if I hadn't used the service myself. And I have, and I was so impressed. So that's what I want to say.
And just to follow on from that, I took it a step further. I then went to work.
You literally went to work for them.
How impressed I was with them. It's been great coming on and great talking to you both. I really appreciate the opportunity. And, if people have got any questions, they can get in touch with us. Or get in touch with me, or get in touch with Simon and Jordan. At the end of the day, I just want to help as many people as possible. Having been through a horrific experience myself, as a family, every person that we can help improve their lives, that means a lot to me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matt. Right, goodbye, everybody. Until next week. And also, if you're listening, give us a subscribe so you never miss an episode. Take care, everybody.
See you, autistic minds.
And that as well. Yeah, bye, everybody. Bye.